most fundamentally root a servant, right? The Bible does not or the Bible does teach that the pastor should be allowed to make their livings doing their work. Find that in 1 Corinthians. In fact, those who labor in word and doctrine are worthy of double honor, a term that often refers to literal double money. That's 1 Timothy 5:17. But there's always a danger of taking advantage of the trust given to spiritual leaders and the temptation to use people's love against them, right? And there's a balance that pastors and missionaries must carefully keep, and this is a tough line. Schrogen put it exceptionally well when he wrote, while the line between seeking support and indulging in greed can be a thin one, still the line exists and is biblical. The pastor or missionary must not be driven by gain, but must not focus on money, must not seek unreasonable compensation, and must be faithful even when there is a threat of losing support. And Paul wrote that he and his companions held up this responsibility, and he was willing to call God as his witness to attest to it. Like I said, pretty powerful statement when you call God to attest to it. I don't know if I would be brave enough for God to be my witness sometimes, because I know he is the ultimate judge. 1 Thessalonians 2, 6 through 8 continues, and let's read it, verses 6 through 8. Nor of men sought we glory, neither of you, nor yet of others, when we might have been burdensome as the apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, even as a nurse cherisheth her children. So being affectionately desirous of you, we were willing to have imparted unto you, not the gospel of God only, but also our own souls, because ye were dear unto us. They could have used their position as an excuse to be a burden to the people, but they refused. Instead, they took on the posture of a nursing mother, which is very intriguing. What a strange image for describing a preacher, right? They are often bold, challenging, and strong, but yet Paul here uses a nursing mother. They did not speak for the praise and preference of the people. They were also as gentle and tender as a nursing mother, feeding her child exactly what the baby needed, with a heart full of love, right? How many pastors or parents have gone too far to one of these extremes? Too gentle, too overbearing, right? There's a balance there, and Paul was talking about it. And that is not our calling, to be extremely pampering or extremely dominant, right? Every believer is given the responsibility of speaking the truth in love, and that's found in Ephesians 4:15. Their affectionate desire for the Thessalonians, their yearning, meant that they were to flatter them or only tell them what they wanted to hear. Skipped another line. But the yearning meant that they were willing to give them their very lives to them in love. They loved the people too much to flatter them or only tell them what they wanted to hear, right? And that should be our love as well, to tell people past the bridge of feelings sometimes and tell them the truth, but also we ought to do it in a loving manner. You know, I've been very, very bad about, when I was younger, telling people the truth because I know that the truth is what they needed to hear, but I tell them in such a way that it offends them, and that's wrong as well sometimes, especially when it's your brothers and sisters, right? We're not supposed to offend our brothers and sisters. The truth should be spoken, but Jesus shows us all the time that there's different ways to speak certain truths, right? Sometimes it calls us to be bold and be like Paul and tell the people of the world that, hey, Jesus is God, and tell them the gospel and the good news, and they might take up stones to throw at us, right? But we ought to do it in love. And that's a hard truth for especially old BJ here, because BJ loves not to sugarcoat anything, love to tell people just how it is, right? And that is wrong often the time, because normally it comes out in a very arrogant manner. So how could they give anything less than the gospel and the devotion of their own lives? Even though some of Paul's opponents were apparently accusing them of trying to take advantage of the people, the opposite was the truth. Their whole time in Thessalonica was marked by sacrificial love. In 1 Corinthians 3, Paul gave them the famous metaphor of planting the church that Apollos watered. The picture is that they had delivered a baby into the world. They nursed it to strength with the pure milk of the word. Paul and his companions could not promise to offer them their own souls because the Thessalonians were dear to them. I gotta get a drink of water. Sorry, the springtime also brings allergies, and it's finally hit me. This is the worst time about spring, but in the winter I get a cold anyway, so I'd rather be warm weather and have allergies. So it's a trade-off I'm willing to make. Paul provided a specific example of his sacrificial love in the next couple verses, verses 9 and 10. And let's go ahead and read them. It says, "For ye remember, brethren, our labor and travail, for laboring night and day, because we would not be chargeable unto any of you. We preach unto you the gospel of God. Ye are witnesses, and God also, how holily and justly and unblameably we behaved ourselves among you that believe." And we might be tempted to take the word labor here in verse 9 as a subtle reference to kind of like childbirth, since Paul just referenced a nursing mother, right, in the verses before. But that is not what this means at all. It's kind of actually impossible in the Greek, which uses a different word for a woman in labor. Instead, this refers to the physical work he did during his ministry. Although he was entitled to support for his ministry, and he received some support from other churches, he did not receive any financial support from the church of Thessalonica. Instead, he worked as a tent maker during that time. And we see that here when it talks about in verse 9 how he was calling them to remember his labor and travail, laboring night and day, right? This speaks to his actual labor with his hands, right? He was working to make ends meet while also preaching them the gospel. Earlier he had called God as his witness, but now he reminded the Thessalonians that they were his witnesses too. They saw his blood and calluses from physical labor, even as they saw his tears and heard his voice pleading with them to follow God. There is a triad again. Their behavior was holy, just, and blameless. There is some evidence that in this context, holiness should be understood as a right relationship with God, and justice as a right relationship with the people. And then being blameless puts the same thing in negative terms. And in their ministry, they did what they should have done and did not do what they should not do, right? There was no room for accusing them of wrong motives or wrongdoing. Their own transformed lives and unconditional love were evidence of the power of their message. And he continually called the people and God to be their witness. Although Paul described himself as a nursing mother earlier in the paragraph, here he transitioned to the more familiar metaphor of a father. This metaphor comes with yet another triad. Verses 11 through 12, let's go ahead and read them. "And as ye know how we exhorted and comforted and charged every one of you, as a father doth his children, that ye would walk worthy of God, who hath called you unto his kingdom and glory." And here, many men suppose that raising children is a primary responsibility of the mother. I've heard that all through my life. Men was like, go to your mom, let your mom take care of you, right? Go to your mom, right? Heard that, but that's not a biblical foundation that we get from the Bible. It is a responsibility of the father to train their children. You can find that here in Ephesians chapter 6, Colossians 3, Hebrews 12. And Paul, he also took that responsibility seriously with his spiritual children, right? And as we discuss the idea of being a follower of men, we might wonder if this contradicts Jesus' instruction to call no man father, back in Matthew chapter 23. In that verse, Jesus warned them about giving certain people an elevated status above others, right? We understand this. Notice that in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9, just before describing how he acted like a father toward them, he called them brethren. Paul's role as a father here does not refer to some elevated status or station demanding respect and obedience, but to his loving direction for their growth in the Lord. It was more of a growth, teaching them, not an elevated status, being called father. The three forms of that instruction are useful for parents raising their children, but also for those in the Lord's churches who are fulfilling the responsibility of training believers less mature in the faith, or the big word discipleship, right? Making disciples. Gonna skip through because we're almost out of time here. We're going to skip to the very end of the chapter, cover that at the end of the chapter. I'm going to go ahead and read all four verses. Here in chapter 2, verses 17 through 20. It says, "But we, brethren, being taken from you for a short time, in presence, not in heart, endeavored the more abundantly to see your face with great desire. Wherefore we would have come unto you, even I, Paul, once and again, but Satan hindered us. For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming? For ye are our glory and joy. Paul concluded this section of the letter with a very pastoral touch. Surely the people of Thessalonica had longed for their friends and wondered why they had not come back yet. And reassuringly, Paul promised them that they wanted to come back, but had been prevented. We see that here in the verses we just read. I'm not going to reread them, just for time's sake. Their stay with them had been all too short, and they wanted to be reunited. Paul switched the first person, to emphasize his personal desire to see them and his repeated efforts over and over again, but they were hindered by Satan. As far as we can tell, Satan did not hinder their work through supernatural opposition, but his favorite tool of all, human sinfulness, right? It's often said, I got a little bit of time to go on this little tangent. Sometimes I do believe that people, as Christians, we like to blame Satan for everything we do, right? Every bad thing we do, we tell a little lie. Satan made me do that, right? Satan is powerful. Jesus tells us that. Back in the Gospels, talks about he's the king of the world, this world right now, right? He's powerful, but he is not all powerful. He's not omnipresent like God, right? He can't be everywhere at once. If Satan's tempting me, Miss Lisa, he can't be tempting you too, right? Sadly, Satan really only has to come on our way one time and set us on a little path of sin, and he's got us. He puts a little desire in front of us, we give into it, and he's got it's like a bouncy ball, It just keeps bouncing. We make decision after decision after decision, right? But Satan here, I do believe, greatly hindered Paul's missionary journey, right? Paul even states that, right? My little tangent is sometimes, human sinfulness, we just do it to ourselves. Our nature just goes to it. And sometimes we got to put the blame on ourselves and our own responsibility and take responsibility for that. And I think there's a precedence for God to be thankful when we do that and to heal us a little better. And as far as we can tell, Satan did not hinder their work through supernatural opposition, like I said, but human sinfulness. The Jews and Gentiles alike made it impossible for Paul to return, but he knew well that his real enemy was not flesh and blood, right? How often do we get frustrated with people or circumstances and forget that we are in the middle of this massive spiritual war, right? We allow everything around us, our material world, to encompass us, and we only see the material, and we forget that the most important battle is the spiritual battle. We forget that all the time. Satan was at work behind the scenes and had fooled Paul's best intentions. But we know, the important thing is we know Satan's triumph is not final, right? He might be the ruler over the world at the moment, and he might have a handful of people in his pocket out in the world today. But Christ is coming, and Paul and his companions knew that the Thessalonians would be reunited with them one day on that blessed day. They wrote in verses 19 and 20, I'm going to reread these because I like them. For what is our hope or joy or crown of rejoicing? Are not even ye in the presence of our Lord Jesus Christ at his coming? For ye are our glory and joy. There was hope. Their hope was not being praised by people. Their glory will be the day when they see the Thessalonians clothed with brightness of Christ, right? When they see him in heaven, they know that their work was good, right? And that's what he's talking about. And their plans to be reunited were delayed, but not finally stopped, not completely stopped, because we know that one day we will all be reunited in heaven, right? And Paul knew this, and so did Silas, and he was thankful for that, because at the end of the day, man, my speech impediment came out there. End of the day. At the end of the day, we know that Christ is king and that he has the final victory, right? That can be our encouragement. So that's all I have for you this morning. I didn't go over very long this time, so that's good. Probably don't have people in the foyer this time waiting on me. I got told last time, that was like, we know Pulley's long-winded. We didn't think you were going to be long-winded. I was like, well, it was a good lesson. I had to keep going. So that's all I got for you this morning. Brother Gene, you want to dismiss us in prayer?
Most gracious Heavenly Father,